What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here. It is Tuesday. It's time for another top 10 video. As promised, this week we are heading into the realm of the martial classes, and we're talking about top 10 magic items for fighters. So if you want to see what the specifics and things are for this, stay tuned. Before we dive into the specifics, I just wanted to do a quick plug for a Kickstarter that I'm personally involved with, and that is Masters, Minions, and Tactics. This is the updated version of Jetpack 7's old Masters and Minions book. This is basically going to be 70 plus pages more than the original. Has obviously 24 days left to go. We've smashed through the funding and we're working on stretch goals at the moment. For the cheapest amount here, for $20, you can get yourself just the PDF of this, but there's a whole bunch of really awesome ones and some actually really good, well-packed deals if you want to get basically Jetpack 7's entire catalog of books in print, which is pretty awesome. You'll scroll down, you'll recognize a handful of different people involved in this. You can get options like this, where you get a leather-backed version of it, a special edition. And again, as we were to scroll down, you'll see right here, we're actually coming up close to an additional master being added to the stretch, or to the book itself. And here it is right here. I'm going to be involved, and there's a unique opportunity where you and I can actually work together to build what's going to go into this book. I'm working on a subclass. I'm also going to possibly be working on some masters and or minions, or both, maybe even some magic items. And you guys are the reason that I'm in the positions to do these things. I would love to have the opportunity to co-design these, as it were, source some ideas from you folks, take that, do what I need to do on my end, and then basically, as a community, add a cool new monster to a printed book that we can all go pick up. So anyway, links in the description to go check that out. And moving on from there, the specifics are pretty much what you'd come to expect at this point. We're not going to be doing any legendary magic items for this video. We're not going to be doing any consumables of any kind, whether what you think of as a consumable, like a scroll or a potion, but also things like the Chime of Opening, right, that have a limited number of uses. And then eventually are gone. We're also not going to choose anything here that is specific to a certain subclass, right? We're not going to be doing something like, oh, if you pick the Eldritch Knight Fighter, this is great because it gives you more magic. No, we're not going to do anything like that. It's going to try to be general fighter subclass agnostic. Oh, and we're also ignoring things like the tomes and manuals that increase your ability scores, as those are useful for basically everybody. I will tell you that this one was a little tricky up front because, as a fighter, right, there's not a whole lot you could do, so we have to kind of think outside of the box. But ultimately, just know a lot of it's going to come down based to a weapon preference and choice. And hopefully, if you work with your DM, if there's a really cool weapon type or weapon or thing that I mentioned on this list, and you're like, oh man, that's awesome, but I wish it was a flail, then maybe your DM will allow you to just make that alteration. So let's dive in. Number 10. The Watchful Helm. This very rare attunement magic item comes to us from Candlekeep Mysteries, one of the more useful things that came out of said book, and is a +1 to your AC, which is awesome. It also makes you aware of your surroundings while you're asleep and gives you advantage on perception checks that rely on sight. So this gives you the opportunity to basically have almost the benefits of trance, not 100%, but you are considered to be asleep but fully aware of your surroundings. You get that advantage on perception checks that rely on sight, which is useful, perception being one of the best, if not the best skill in the game, at least as things stand currently. Just also as a reminder that a advantage on a check means that you have a +5 bonus to the passive version of that. So in theory, your passive perception relying on sight has a +5 to it. And then also as a bonus action, you can cast See Invisibility once per day, basically once until the next dawn. Listen, you're a fighter. Your job, more often than not, is to hit things, tank through stuff, and then also be able to hit it. And if it's invisible, it's a lot harder to hit, so this just takes away one of the few limiting factors. Oh, one thing I didn't mention at the start, and I should have, is remember that we also, at the start of this new updated series for 2022, we made a list of magic items that are beneficial for all classes. That list should also be considered, that plus whatever we're augmenting here specifically for fighters. Number 9. The Lifewell Tattoo. This comes to us from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. It is a very rare attunement magic item. And again, kind of in theme with what we just talked about, right? The Watchful Helm allows you to hit things that are invisible because your job is to hit stuff. Well, you can't hit stuff if you're unconscious, so the Lifewell Tattoo goes a little above and beyond there. First of all, it gives you resistance to necrotic damage, which is something you just always have. Necrotic damage can be pretty nasty, especially when you get to higher levels. A lot of the really high damaging spells, for example, Finger of Death comes to mind, is necrotic damage. So this will give you resistance to that. But the reason we kind of put it on here is when you would be reduced to 0 hit points, you drop to 1 hit point instead. Once you use this property, it can't be used until the next dawn. So this basically giving you the benefit of the current half-orc, Relentless Fury, Relentless Endurance, I think is what it's called, where you go to 0, you go to 1 instead. This basically gives you that, and you don't have to play a half-orc. So actually, between the Watchful Helm and this item, if you were able to have both, let's say, you basically can have some of the benefits of being an elf and an orc, or, an elf and a half-orc, and basically be any other race that you choose. I also do question the rarity of this item. Very rare does seem pretty high for a once-a-day ability, although very beneficial, and a resistance. So, I don't know. What do you think? Should this be adjusted? Do you think this is more of a rare item, or do you think we should add something extra to it to justify its rarity level? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. Number 8. The Dragon Wing Bow. This rare bow attunement magic item comes to us from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. Now, again, if you are an archery or bow-based fighter, this may move up in the list for you. But the reason this is here is it's not a bad thing for anybody who has access to a bow to have one on their person to be able to use it if they are in a situation where they need to do a ranged attack or something that may be outside of the normal distance of like a thrown javelin or what have you. So, one, it has the cool thematics of being dragon-based, but when you hit with an attack roll using this magic bow, the target takes an extra d6 damage of the same type of the breath weapon associated with the bow, right? So acid, cold, fire, force, lightning, necrotic, poison, psychic, radiant, or thunder, right? And you can see it's right here. It just has these are the standard things for the different bows that it could be. So it doesn't specify crossbow or something like short bow or longbow, so whichever works. And what's also really cool is it produces its own ammunition, right? So automatically creating one piece of magic ammunition when you pull back the string, the ammo created by the bow vanishes the instant after it hits or misses the target. So potentially if you're in a situation where, I don't know, I guess you're doing forensics and people are looking to find the murder weapon, if the arrow will disappear. But also because it's tied to not only the chromatic and metallic dragons, it also includes the gem dragons, you have the opportunity to use some really unique damage types like force, necrotic, psychic, radiant damage on this bow, which is pretty cool. I do feel like to me, it feels like this could probably have not been an attunement magic item, and I think it would have been okay. But either way, pretty solid. Number 7. The Mantle of Spell Resistance. This rare magic item comes to us from the basic rules. It is attunement, and this was also a runner-up for being an item that could be useful for every class, but it gives you advantage on saving throws against spells while you wear this cloak. I don't particularly love the Mantle of Spell Resistance personally, but I do recognize that advantage on saving throws against spells is pretty great. There are some races that have the ability to get advantage on saving throws of a specific type. For example, gnomes, I think it's intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. Some other ones may be able to get advantage as well. I think there's a couple other that are I can't think of what they are off the top of my head. But I think, I mean, I'm someone who plays a paladin a lot, and I prefer Oath of the Ancients, and they have an aura that just gives you resistance to damage from spells. I think that this would be a really cool, like, if there's a better version that you wanted to make of the Mantle of Spell Resistance that was advantage on saving throws against spells and resistance to saving throws, and resistance to damage from spells. I think that might be an abjuration wizard ability, but either way, again, the ability for you to get in there and do what you need to do as a fighter is critical to you being a fighter. So if you get held up with something like a hold person or mind controlled or something like that, that's not going to be good for anybody in the party. So giving yourself advantage on those saving throws will only benefit you in the long run. Number 6. The Sapphire Buckler. This very rare attunement magic item comes to us from Fizban's Treasury of Dragons again. And this, again, consider this if you are a fighter that uses a shield. If you are a fighter that uses two-handed weapons, I guess you could just swap this out with the animated shield instead, providing you a shield bonus with allowing your hands to be free to fire a bow or wield a greatsword or what have you. But while wielding the shield, you have resistance to psychic and thunder damage. Those are two not super common damage types, but it's something that, it's always nice to have extra damage resistances built in. Plus, it's made out of a Sapphire Dragon scale, so it has that cool thematics to it. And then when you take damage from a creature that is within 5 feet of you, you can use your reaction to deal 2d6 thunder damage to that creature. But typically, as a fighter, there may be some examples that have it pretty consistently, but for the most part, fighters, your reaction is probably going to be reserved for activating a held action or an opportunity attack. This gives you a once per turn means of possibly being able to deal retributive damage to a creature. It's not limited. It's just whenever you take damage from a creature within 5 feet and you happen to still have your reaction, you can choose to deal the 2d6 thunder damage. And that damage there's no saving throw. It's just flat damage on top of the always on resistance to 2 damage types. And then it has a much more niche version ability here. As an action, you can use the shield to help you locate aberrations until the end of your next turn. If any aberrations are within 1 mile of you, the shield emits a low humming tone for a moment. You know the direction of all aberrations within that range. This is not usable again until the next dawn. Again, that is a function of Sapphire Dragons, so that's why that is here on this shield, because it may seem out of place for people who don't know. But Sapphire Dragons being sort of not down with aberrations and wanting to strike them down, that kind of makes sense. But yeah, I think this is pretty solid. And don't forget that it is still a shield, so at base level it is providing you with a +2 AC. So this is +2 AC, resistance to 2 damage types, a situationally useful ability to find aberrations, and a constant reaction way to deal retributive damage if you are struck first. Number 5. The Eldritch Claw Tattoo. This uncommon attunement magic item comes to us from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything again. On the base level, it's going to make your unarmed strikes magical, and they're also going to deal a +1 to attack and damage. Again, potentially you may not be, not to say that you couldn't be an unarmed strike-based fighter, which again, with the certain fighting styles, you could choose to have that be your primary means of damage. Which, in my mind, the way I would consider using this is more of the lesser of the two abilities, but it does still mean your fists are magic, or whatever part of your body you're using for your unarmed strike, and they do benefit from that +1 bonus to attack and damage. But the real reason that I have it here is as a bonus action, empower the tattoo for a minute. For the duration, any weapon you wield and your unarmed strikes, if you wanted to go that route as well, can reach a target up to 15 feet away. So you could just turn your maul, your greatsword, your battle axe, which does not have reach, to now have 15 feet of reach. And if that wasn't enough, it also does an extra D6 force damage on a hit. And then again, it can't be used again until the next dawn. So the only downside is a once per kind of long rest situation. But to take whatever situation you're in and now extend your reach with your weapons out to 15 feet, and then deal an extra D6 damage on top of that. And again, the constant benefit of the magical unarmed strikes. Very useful. Again, this is obviously geared more towards unarmed strikes and or melee-based fighters. But either way, I think it's a pretty useful magic item. And it's interesting that this is an uncommon magic item, whereas the Lifewell Tattoo was very rare, and I feel like they're not 100% on the same level power-wise, but if you look at the two, I think something may be a little bit off. Number 4. The Butcher's Bib from Explorer's Guide to Wildmount is making a return here as well. This rare attunement magic item is beneficial for you if you are a wielder of slashing weapons. So once per turn, when you roll damage for a melee attack with a weapon, you can reroll that weapon's damage dice. If you do so, you must take the second total. That is regardless of the type of weapon that you're doing when you make a melee attack. So it could be with a weapon. So any kind of weapon, you possibly get the kind of some of the... Basically, I think it's the benefit essentially of Savage Attacker for the most part, but you are limited to only taking the secondary roll. So consider if you roll very poorly on your damage rolls, then it may be a no-brainer to activate this ability. But the main reason that I have it here is your weapon attacks that deal slashing damage score a critical hit on a 19 or a 20. This gives you the benefit of some of the improved critical options that the champion fighter typically has without having to be a champion fighter. It just limits you to only using slashing damage weapons. Again, I still feel like there should be additional versions of this apron, essentially one for bludgeoning damage and then one also for piercing damage. And some of you have suggested great options in the comments for ways you could go about adding that in. And I think that, it may be worth it, even if you may have this propensity to use bludgeoning damage based weapons on your character, it might be worth switching to slashing if a butcher's bib comes into your possession. Number 3. Mizzium Armor is the best armor in the game, in my opinion. It is a rare magic item, but is non-attunement. It comes to us from Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica. It provides us all of the benefits of adamantine armor in that a critical hit while wearing said armor becomes a normal hit, but it also has the benefits that when you are subjected to a magical effect that causes you to make a strength or constitution saving throw to take half damage, if you succeed, you take no damage. So it gives you pseudo evasion benefits, but for strength and constitution saving throw magical effects. So it doesn't necessarily, it could be a spell, it could be some other magical effect, and it turns critical hits into normal hits for you. I think it's absolutely one of the best armor types out there. And I mentioned the fact that you get all of that without having it be attunement. So this is definitely up there. I feel like any class that can wear medium or heavy armor that's not hide should definitely invest in Mizzium Armor if your DM decides to consider Mizzium a material that exists in your world. Number 2. A Dragon's Wrath weapon. This is a variable attunement magic item that was introduced to us in Fizban's Treasury of Dragon. There is a bunch of Fizban's items on this list, but they did give us a bunch of awesome stuff to add in, so it just kind of makes sense. Now, this does require that your DM is going to consider using Horde magic items. If you remember how these work, I'll give you a quick primer. Essentially, a dragon, these items exist and they have 4 different stages. We'll obviously only cover the first 3 because the 4th stage is considered a legendary magic item. But they basically need to be steeped in a dragon's horde for a period of time, and then they essentially absorb some of the power of the dragon. There are different options for, like, if you kill a dragon and then put it in the horde, then it can get it. I did a whole video on these, so you can go and check that out if you want to see more about how these work. But a Dragon's Wrath weapon is a really awesome weapon that can be of any kind. So this could be your two-handed weapon that you use because you're a great sword, great axe fighter. It could be your single-handed weapon. It could be your bow, right? It's any item, any weapon of your choice. And if you get the basic level, the slumbering level, which is essentially you have this item, the lowest level it can always be is slumbering, which means it's not steeped in any dragon horde. It's the basic level. Whenever you roll a natural 20 on an attack roll with this weapon, each creature of your choice within 5 feet of the initial target takes 5 damage of the type dealt by the Dragon's Breath weapon. So if this is a red Dragon's Wrath weapon, it's fire damage. But what's nice is I actually really like this ability when you hit a 20 on your target, creatures of your choice within 5 feet of said target take 5 damage, which is also nice because it allows you to sculpt it around your allies. And that's just a nice kind of mini AoE for the nice benefit of rolling a natural 20. If you happen to do whatever is required to steep this to upgrade it to the next level of Stirring, which jumps it up to a rare level, you get everything we just talked about, the natural 20 AoE, but is now also a +1 weapon, and whenever you hit a base creature with it, it does an extra d6. So if we continue with our red Dragon's Wrath weapon, if we roll a natural 20, we have that little burst of AoE on the creature we hit. We also have a +1 to attack and damage to this weapon all the time, and anybody we hit with the base weapon attack takes an extra d6 in this instance of fire damage if it was a red dragon based one. And if we happen to steep it even further to the weakened level, the wakened level, my mistake, it becomes very rare. It gets everything we just talked about. That +1 to attack and damage rolls becomes a +2 to attack and damage rolls. The extra d6 fire damage or damage of the breath weapon type we were talking about goes up from 1d6 up to 2d6. And you get a breath weapon. As an action, you can unleash a 30-foot cone of destructive energy from said weapon. Again, it's technically a breath weapon. It's a blast from the weapon itself. But each creature in that area, so this does not distinguish friend from foe, must make a dexterity saving throw, take 8d6 damage of the weapon dealt by the damage type dealt by the dragon's breath weapon. On a failure, it takes half as much on a success. And then this is usable once until the next dawn. So essentially, this gives you basically fireball, but in a 30-foot cone with a pretty high DC 16 dexterity saving throw. So depending on what your ability scores are, this could be possibly even better than casters in your party at the time that you would be able to get this this weapon. So I mean, this basically makes it a +2 weapon, which is awesome in and of itself. A +2 weapon that can deal 2d6 extra damage on a hit. If you crit, it can do AoE damage, and it gives you a 30-foot cone AoE of an elemental damage type. And then again, it also has the potential to grow beyond this to the legendary level, which basically just ups everything I just talked about by a factor. So, yeah, this is awesome. It could be, like I said, it could be for your ranged fighter who uses a bow or something. It could be for your sword and board fighter with a sword and shield, or it could be for your two-handed strongman wielding a maul. Number 1. The Belt of Giant Strength. You really can't go wrong with these. You've got they have a couple of different levels here. The rare level, which is the lowest level here, gives you the Belt of Hill Giant Strength, which sets your strength score permanently to a 21. I should say that this is an attunement magic item, comes to us from the base rules. And yeah, you can get the Belt of Hill Giant Strength to give you a flat strength of 21 as a rare magic item. Frost Giant or Stone Giant to set your strength score to a 23. All the way up to the Belt of Fire Giant Strength with a setting your strength to a 25, still being very rare. Obviously, you can see that there are some that go beyond into the legendary territory, but as we stated, we are focusing primarily on very rare and lower magic items. So again, having your strength score be a 25 would be pretty nutty. Again, I realize that this doesn't necessarily apply to those who want to be purely ranged, but I'd say majority of the time, fighters are usually based on strength, and this is really too good of a magic item to pass up if your DM will let you have it, and there's no reason that your ranged fighter couldn't mix it up into melee if the opportunity arose. So anyway, folks, that is my top 10 magic items for fighters updated through 2022. We're continuing on our way through the alphabet, so that means that next up on this list is the monk. So we're getting more in martial territory as we continue on through this list. So if you want to see the top 10 magic items for the monk, be sure to tune in next Tuesday. So I wanted to, again, say thank you to everybody. Consider checking out the Jetpack 7 link that's a pinned comment as well as the top of the video description to back Masters, Minions, and Tactics, a Kickstarter that I am a part of. So I would appreciate it. But I'm also going to say, use your judgment, right? Go read the Kickstarter. Check out my video on it if you want. Don't back it just because I'm telling you, hey, I'm Ted and I'm involved in it and it would benefit me monetarily if you were to back the Kickstarter, which all of that is a truthful statement. But I also want you to make your own decisions and see if you think it's worth your time. So anyway, thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for continuing to support me and the channel. And I will see you all next time.